professor at the National University of Ireland, Galway, and Cheng Yu Tong, visiting professor at the Faculty of Law of the University of Hong Kong in China. He was appointed at United Nations Special Rapporteur as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on minority issues by the Human Rights Council, and assumed his function on the 1st of August 2017. Born in Canada, Fernand de Varennes is the Dean of the Faculty of Law at the University of Moncton in Canada. He taught law for nearly 20 years in Australia and worked on minority rights and language rights in Ethiopia, the Baltic states, Indonesia, Northern Ireland, and other countries. He is an associate professor at the Center for Human Rights at the University of South Africa, and is also the author of nearly 200 publications published in around 30 languages. Fernand de Varennes' work and commitment focuses on the human rights of minorities, as well as the question of ethnic conflicts, the rights of migrants, the relationship between ethnicity, human rights, and democracies, and the use of federalism and other forms of autonomy arrangements to balance competing cultural interests. His contributions on these topics in many parts of the world, including as a professor for almost 20 years at Murdoch University in Australia, as a guest professor at the following institution in Africa, Asia, and Europe. So there is a very long list of academy, Abu Academy, Dato Bunka University, Ethiopian Civil Service University, and so forth. Reports for and spoken in numerous forums on these issues, including before UN committees in Geneva, the European Parliament in Brussels, and with the OSCE High Commissioner on National Minorities. He is very attentive to the problems of Tamils and also of those of Southern Cameroons, Western Sahrawis, and all the other minorities who are fighting for nation in this globe. We have the immense pleasure to have him here within us, among us today. And we have also have the privilege to welcome him in various meetings that we did inside the premises of UN, Human Rights Council in Geneva also. And he is our great friend for the minority voice of this world, and we are very much pleased to welcome him on this stage today. So we will have Mr. de Varennes' statement at last, including all your speakers, our dear speakers' statements of this event. So today we are in our speakers. So let me introduce them first. We'll have Rev.Father Jerry Jumbam from for the Southern Cameroons issues. And then we'll have the pleasure to listen to Mr. Nasr Obaid from Southern Yemen, who is in Germany, about the Southern Yemeni people's issues. And then we'll hear Mr. Maranadan Vimerson, who will talk about the Tamils issue in Sri Lanka. And then we will have Mr. Hassan Mailid, who will speak about the Western Sahrawis' fate. And then we will move on to Dr.Baban Eliassi, who is a sociologist and a Kurdish activist, who will speak about his people's struggle from. So without further more delaying, I will now invite to take the floor Mr. Rev.Father Jerry Jumbam, who is a human rights activist from, he's today from Italy, because he is living in exile in Italy. He is from Southern Cameroon, and he's a fervent activist for the Ambazonian people rights in Southern Cameroon, and has played a major role in the freedom struggle of his people. He never rejects our calls to participate to any of our meetings and actions together. We are pleased to have his cooperation for now 2 years with the Tamils. And Rev.Father Gerald Jumbam, alias Jerry Jumbam, is a priest whose inner freedom allows him to express himself freely and with conscience. And his huge commitment to the theological enterprise has wired his spirits to fashion out a theology for his African peoples. He calls it theology of self-determination, theology of self-determination, sorry. He has launched his venture with a pioneering book entitled Independence or Nothing. Today he will present his speech entitled The Pillar of Fire by Night. So welcome, Rev.Father Jerry Jumbam. The floor is yours.
I'm very grateful. I thank the host for the introduction, wonderful introduction about me. And we'll just go immediately to the work I have here, which she has beautifully put it, The Pillar of Fire by Night. I decided to entitle it The Pillar of Fire by Night, Self-Determination, and the British Southern Cameroons. The American poet Robert Frost, in his famous poem, The Road Not Taken, helps me to describe in metaphor what the situation of the people of the Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia, are in today. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry, I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down, one as far as I could. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. The road through self-determination to total independence, the Southern Cameroons. We make decisions, and decisions turn around and make us. The road not taken, we took it, and that has made all the difference. Independence is not a walk in the park. The nation of Israel is leaving the land of Egypt. As soon as they cross the Red Sea, they are going to go down towards Mount Sinai, and eventually they are going to come up to the promised land. And as they are leaving the safety and security of Egypt, something amazing happens. Best described in Exodus chapter 13, verses 20 to 23. And it says, after leaving Sukkoth, they camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. The desert was behind them. The Red Sea was in front of them. And here comes the Egyptians. The people were scared to death because all they had known was Egypt and Pharaoh. And as bad as that was, at least they felt secure. But what will they do now that they are leaving their security behind them? God answers their concern by sending them a moving pillar to guide them on their way. All they had to do was follow the cloud and the fire, and they would be safe. Thus, the pillar of fire by night of the Southern Cameroons. Ladies and gentlemen, what pulls and moves us on to engage in these things? It is, to me, the deep discernment of the sanctity of my conscience, the anguish of our suffering people, the inviolability of every human being as made in the image and likeness of God, which to me is what is called self-determination, because it is the consciousness of being a human being, of accepting that you are just as same as the other person, of believing that you are a people, and of making yourself conscious of the fact that you have a land and you can make a country. Self-determination, the British Southern Cameroons, in matters of self-determination, its character, validity, and credibility, its tenable principles, its integrity and standing cannot more be approached as a matter of proposal or idea, unless we may plausibly so regard the Gambia and Eritrea. The Southern Cameroons is no subject of pastime or amusement. It is concrete material. It is existence. It is out there in the streets. It is the destiny of millions of people who are after legitimate space to breathe. It has come and become public property. In the words of the psalmist, its message has gone through the earth, and their words to all the world. God has made a home in the heavens for this country, the British Southern Cameroons. What genuine self-determination does is to enable the oppressed people to speak, not from the point of view of the victim, but from the high point of view of a people, of human beings, of prophets, of kings, of queens, of gods. When you think of yourself as a victim, you can have no point of view because you are already victim. The evidence of victim as victim validates the argument of the oppressor that you are there to work for him. The freedom fighters and human rights activists of our land in recent years have been offensively earnest. They have no choice. They want to alter the arrangement which has kept them and their people out in rain and the heat of the sun. They have fought and won some victories. They have changed a few things and are struggling under leadership crisis. But quite quickly, this great collusive struggle that is independence shows its true face to us. And we are appalled, but only momentarily, for even our setbacks, we have gained something of inestimable value, a baptism of fire, the courage and determination never to surrender. The Southern Cameroonian has always held in high esteem the United Nations as a justice project, factory of human hope. But the UNO must stop being nice to state terrorism in Africa. What is the crime of the Amazonian that we should turn him into a man of hopelessness? This man who carries a heart and soul, so thirsty for excellence. His needs are so few and so straightforward. He's surprised that we can't understand these simple demands. Childlike baffles him with a profound and saintly humility as he laments alone, denied dignity, and without anyone to support and cuddle him. They want total independence. Two words which the Cameroonian Republic in Yaoundé finds apocalyptic, and which has reduced these oppressors into a desperation until they bring a continental football competition to prove a lie to the world. They have instead exposed their vulnerability. Look at the arranging of the world, at the unbalanced nature of power in the world. The just and innocent wallowing in prison jails while hoodlums parade cities and towns free. Frustrations like these can break a heart. Some wild beast had plunged its poisonous fangs into the heart of the world, it seems, and squeezed genuine justice out of the earth's bloodstream. And if so, does God really exist? This may seem strange coming from a priest, but I have seen these things in concrete living that my questions are genuine. For if he is truly God, why does he suffer one recalcitrant people to suppress and rob another people of their whole right to exist? We do not seek the support of the UN to progress any narrow version of self-determination, but to follow the full-bodied quest of independence. we seek support for the simple reason of opportunity to rule ourselves with promises of an excellent democracy, building an enduring peace for our people, our continent, and for the world. These are the convictions that are the driving force behind the Southern Cameroon's candidature for full membership in the UN. We are unapologetic about our demands. Independence or nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Father Jumbam, for your beautiful speech and your this pillar of fire by night, which really wears its names very well. So Mr. Father Jerry Jumbam has questioned the UN system, and he said the UN must ask itself what its functions are. So I think at the end, our friend can maybe will have the chance to reply to his question. And thank you, Father Jerry, for having presented the frustrations of the people who are fighting for their self-determination. So independence or nothing. We stand by you, and thank you very much for this beautiful intervention. So now we shall move on to our next speaker, who is Mr. Nasr Obaid. Mr. Nasr Obaid is a human rights activist from South Yemen. He is living in exile in Germany, as he is an active youngster for the freedom fight for his people. He's also part of the NGO, which is named Southern Independent Group. He is now joining us from Germany, and where he lives as a refugee, because he was researched by his own government for his participation on the freedom struggle for his people. We are working with Mr. Nasr Obaid for more than 6 years now, so we are very pleased to have him also by our side with Tamils, and we have had a lot of support from him as we always compare Tamils and Southern Yemenis about we talk a lot with him about this. We share the same compassion, and we share the same problems also. So we have here today Mr. Nasr Obaid from Germany, who will speak about the Southern Yemeni's fate in self-determination fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nisha. I'm very happy also to be with you today. Maybe before 6 months we were together also, our college also with you. Actually today I would like to share with you and summarize with you the situation in the south of Yemen, starting from 1990 till the current hot situation nowadays. So I will start with small information about the unity. Yemeni unification took place in May 22, 1990, when the area of the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, also known as South of Yemen, was united with the Yemen Arab Republic, also known as North of Yemen, forming the Republic of Yemen. But after 2 years of the unity, it became clear to the southern people that the regime in the north did not have a good intention with the unity project. Between 1990 and 1994, there was an assassination combined of southern leadership. More than 140 leading figures were killed. In April 1994, the northern regime announced the war against the south, where the president of Yemen said in the speech, "No choice for the southern leaders in Aden except escaping through the Red and the Arabian Sea." At that time, a coalition of northern allies, tribes, extremists, and the regime began to be taken hold of the country, marginalizing the Southerners. Tens of thousands of the Southerners are forced out of the military and civilian positions. No attempt were made by the Northern lead and influenced regime to remedy the Southern grievances after the war. Feeling oppressed and with the rightful demands ignored, Southerns began the Southern Peaceful Movement, which began on the 7th July 2007. This movement was met with force, and over 3,000 activists were killed and 1,000 injured, detained, or fled the country for the safety. In 2011, also, a movement took place in the north against the corruption of Ali Saleh. Ali Saleh is the president of Yemen at that time. And he was overthrown, but it was not a successful movement as a Muslim Brotherhood and the Houthis group took control of the land and the situation there. In September 2014, the Houthi militia, in cooperation with the former regime of Ali Saleh, staged a military coup and took control of the capital Sana'a and the surrounding districts there. The government leader fled abroad and to the area to the south. In April 2015, the south has been invaded by the north once again by the army of the former president and the Iranian-backed Houthi militia. The ongoing war reinforces the northern desire to ensure that the south remains occupied and the northern warring parties, despite being in conflict, maintaining a unified position to deny the Southerners to the right to self-determination. But after around 4 months of Southern resistance backed by the Emirati forces, the Southern resistance liberated Aden and the surrounding areas. The resistance continued until the rest of the areas were liberated. But 2 years after the Southern resistance ousted the Houthis rebels and the Saleh forces, nothing has been made by the Hadi government to improve the life of the people in the south. Not even the most basic of services provided. The legitimate government of Hadi has failed to show the Southerners that they can be respected and treated differently from the previous governments. Because of these situations, the Southern Transitional Council, namely called STC, was founded in 2017 with the aim of leading the territories of the former People Democratic Republic of Yemen to independence. The STC was founded to represent the interests of the South and to provide its political leadership. The fact that STC is currently the dominant organization in the Southern movement is largely due to the support of the larger parts of the population in the South. As a result of the political tensions with illegitimate governments, army forces of the legitimate government supported by tribes extremists attacked Shabwa in 2018 and set their foot there. Most of these forces came from the north. Shabwa is a district located in the south, in the border with the north. In September 2021, the Houthis militia intensified their military operation against Shabwa districts. Unfortunately, the army forces of the legitimate government left Shabwa districts without any defense, and Houthis militia retook 3 districts in Shabwa. But last month, in January, exactly in January 2022, Southern military forces backed by the STC pushed into the Houthis controlled area and liberated Shabwa district, and now mostly they are controlling the whole district in Shabwa. This is in terms what's happened in the ground. In terms of political point of view, last month, in an interview with the Saudi channel Al Arabiya, STC President Idrous al-Zubaydi said that the nature of the future state in the south of Yemen will be determined by the southern people through the referendum. He added that STC project is clear and we have the right to announce it anytime we see fit. He said also that we are seeking self-determination as the support for the self-determination by the United Nations remains right for all the human. He mentioned that STC vision revolves around 3 options on the table that will be subject to referendum determined by the southern people. The first option is returned to before 1990, 2 countries separated, while the second one is 2 federal states, and the third option is the survival of unity. As we have seen, the regional community nowadays believes that the stability in the South Yemen has become an urgent necessity, and somehow it gives some signals they may accept our rights for the self-determination. But there is no clear point of view in the international community regarding the future of the South of Yemen, as you know, as they have different interests. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nasr Obaid. Intervention. You beautifully presented your historical presentation of the struggle faced by your people, our dear southern Yemenis, and you also evoked the current situation of your freedom struggle there. And as you, I think I can interpret like this, you are also asking to this UN system that you are questioning on the referendum and many other options. So we hope that Fernand de Varennes can answer to these questions at the end in his speech. Thank you, Nasr Obaid, for your intervention again. Now we move on to our next speaker, Mr. Maranadan Vimerson, who is a Tamil rights activist from France. He is also a master's student in European law in the University of Paris-Créteil in France. He is born in France. He's part of the 2nd generation of Sri Lankan Tamil refugees whose parents are refugees. And his parents had to flee from Sri Lankan genocidal government to seek refuge in France, and where Vimerson is known and studying as a successful master student, and we are pleased to have him in our team also, Global Tamil Movement Network, as a young active student who is also presenting his research and problematic of the issues faced by Sri Lankan Tamils in their struggle for freedom fight. So let's welcome Mr. Maranadan Vimerson to present his speech. The floor is yours.
So thank you for your presentation. And I am also happy to be part of the Global Tamil Movement team. And then I want to thank, with our association, the participation of Dr. Fernand de Varennes, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues, and all the other participants to this event. I want to take this opportunity to brief you on the situation of Ilam Tamil's freedom struggle and ask to help us to obtain justice for Tamil people under international mechanism. To start, I would like to emphasize the fact that the principle of self-determination is provided by the Article 1 of the Charter of the United Nations, because in substance, this principle is considered as fundamental to the maintenance of friendly relations and peace among states. By studying the history of the actual Sri Lanka, which was named Ceylon under the Western occupation, it is easy to distinguish two nations, the Tamil nation and the Sinhalese nation. Moreover, we see clearly that the Tamil nation really wanted and wants now is independence, by seeing also the manifestation occurred in nowadays recently in Sri Lanka. As said before, they were separated Tamil kingdoms and Sinhala kingdoms in the island of Ceylon before the arrival of colonial powers in the 15th century. The colonial power, the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the British, administrated the Sinhala kingdom and the Tamil kingdoms separately during the initial period of their ruling. But on the recommendation of the Colebrook Commission in 1833, Sinhalese and Tamil kingdoms were united by the British for the purpose of administrative convenience. Therefore, directly after the end of the British colonization and the independence of Sri Lanka, the Ilangai Tamil Arasu Katchi, known as ITAC, which was formed in 1949, recalled that the Tamil nation is distinct from the Sinhalese nation and demanded for a federal arrangement in the north and the east, where the Tamil-speaking peoples are predominant majority. Then, in 1976, the Vattukotta resolution was adopted by the Tamil United Liberation Front seeking to work for the creation of an independent state of Tamil Nadu. It is also important to state that Tamil did not grant their consent to the enactment of the 1972 and 1978 Constitution of Sri Lanka that were enacted on the basis of the unitary character of the state without the participation of and with opposition from the elected Tamil representative of the major Tamil political parties. Consequently, the Elam Tamils of the island of Sri Lanka have a distinct language, a distinct culture, and a historic relationship to the northeastern part of the said island, a relationship which is recognized in various pacts, including the 1987 Indo-Lanka Accord constitute Tamil as ethnic group under international law, thus entitled to realize their inherent right to self-determination. And moreover, it is important to recall that between 1956 and 2009, Tamils have been subjected to 157 racial massacres on the island of Sri Lanka. In addition, the war between the state of Sri Lanka and the freedom fighters ended in May 2009 with gruesome and shocking mass atrocity committed against the Tamil civilians. According to the 2011 report of the panel of experts established by the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, there are credible evidence that crimes against humanity and war crimes were committed during and after the war by Sri Lankan state. Therefore, observing all those elements with the Association Bharati Centre Culturel Franco-Tamil and the Global Tamil Movement, we call upon the UN Human Rights Council members, other affiliated UN agency and members of states to adopt, as of matter of utmost urgency, the following steps to protect the Tamil nation. So recognize the genocide resolution passed unanimously in the Northern Provincial Council of Sri Lanka on 10th February in 2015. Direct appropriate measures at the International Criminal Court outlining that the affected Tamil nation have no face in any domestic commissions or inquiry. A special session at the Human Rights Council on Sri Lanka to refer Sri Lanka to the International Criminal Court by the Security Council. Besides that, we ask genuinely to the special rapporteurs and treaty body experts to help us to ensure human rights defender in Sri Lanka to carry out their legitimate works in safe and enabling an environment without fear or threat, acts of intimidation or reprisal to the witness and their families seeking truth and justice, and not to fail to prosecute wrongdoers. It is well known that the victims of genocide in Sri Lanka are Tamil in the end of Sinhala government and its security forces. However, the victim Tamils has been consciously omitted and never mentioned in any of the resolution of the Human Rights Council and other UN reports. We therefore request you to investigate this omission and to mention the appropriate word of Tamil where it's needful. Thank you for your listening and attention.
Thank you, Maranadan, for your beautiful intervention. It was a very clear cut of the Tamil people's political and historical struggle for their right to self-determination in the request to the international community. So you talked about the colonial period, and coming from this, you talked about the formation of Tamil political parties which sought for a political solution for the so-called ethnic issues and resulted to the failures. And then you also talk about the Ratchapuri resolution where Tamils took up arms. And then you also underline the existence of the de facto state of the Tamil that has been annihilated at the end in 2009. And you also pointed out how the system failed protecting the Tamils also. So we hope also at the end that our friend will touch also some few words about Sri Lankan Tamils issue in his speech. And now we are moving on to our next speaker. Mr. Hassan Mailid will be our next speaker. He is a human rights activist from France. He's joining from France, where he is living in exile. He's putting his people's fate. That means Western Sahrawis. And his speech will be in French, and that will be translated by Omeima, our Iron Lady, who will translate his speech in English for us. So he had to flee from his country because he tried to put some international focus on the problems faced by Western Sahrawis by the Moroccan government. So he was searched by Morocco, and now he's living in France. So hence he's in French. So we're extremely sorry for that, but we will have a pleasant translation by Omeima. We welcome further now Mr. Hassan Mailid from France.
Merci, thank you. Hello everybody. L'intervention, avant l'intervention, c'est un immense plaisir d'intervenir devant cette importante conférence. Revenons sur le droit de l'autodétermination des peuples du Sahara occidental. Et notons qu'on importe que l'analyse de la question du Sahara occidental devra tenir compte des statuts juridiques des territoires du Sahara occidental, séparés et distincts de toute puissance administrative ou puissance d'occupation. et que toute approche ignorant cet énoncé de base sera qualifiée d'illégale et en désaccord avec le droit international. Le Sahara occidental est sur l'agenda des Nations Unies depuis 1963 et considéré par l'organisation onusienne comme un territoire non autonome auquel s'applique la résolution 1514 du 14 décembre de 1960 de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies, la déclaration sur l'octroi de l'indépendance aux pays et aux peuples coloniaux. À ce jour, le territoire continue sur l'agenda des Nations Unies et fait partie des 17 territoires non autonomes qui n'ont pas encore exercé leur droit à l'autodétermination. Figurant sur la liste des Nations Unies, il est le seul territoire sur le continent africain à décoloniser. La résolution 2072 de 1965, basée sur les chapitres du comité spécial chargé d'étudier le cas du Sahara occidental, a bien précisé que c'était une question de décolonisation dont l'Espagne est la puissance administrante. Et en 1974, l'accord international de justice a conclu que les informations et les documents posés devant lui ne permettent d'établir aucun lien de souveraineté entre le territoire du Sahara occidental et le Royaume du Maroc, ni entre le territoire du Sahara occidental et l'entité mauritanienne d'autre part. Et donc, elle a conclu qu'il n'a trouvé aucun lien de caractère à affecter l'application de la résolution 1514 de 1960. Sachant que toutes les résolutions postérieures ont réaffirmé que la question du Sahara occidental est une question de décolonisation à parachever sur la base de l'exercice par le peuple du Sahara occidental de son droit à l'autodétermination et à l'indépendance, et par le biais d'un référendum libre, démocratique, impartial, sans contrainte ni militaire ni administrative, et selon les résolutions 2229 de 1966 et 6686 de 2012, l'organisation de ladite référendum sera tenue sous les auspices de l'Organisation des Nations Unies, afin de permettre à la population autochtone des territoires du Sahara occidental d'exercer son droit à l'autodétermination, où seuls les habitants autochtones du Sahara occidental peuvent participer. De cette clarté sur le plan juridique et judiciaire, il en découle plusieurs responsabilités, citant la responsabilité des Nations Unies d'aider le peuple sahraoui, car il a la légitimité de la lutte qu'il mène pour obtenir la jouissance de ce droit à l'autodétermination et à l'indépendance. Et donc, la décolonisation du Sahara occidental est la responsabilité des Nations Unies et de l'Union africaine. Malheureusement, les récents développements de la question du Sahara occidental confirment avec regret l'absence de volonté chez l'occupant marocain de libérer le territoire et de mettre fin au conflit maroco-sahraoui. La guerre actuelle au Sahara occidental présente un grand danger pour la vie des civils sahraouis, car l'occupant marocain utilise des drones pour bombarder des civils, tuant plus de 20 civils au cours des 2 derniers mois seulement. La communauté internationale est responsable de la protection des civils sahraouis sous occupation militaire marocaine et sous l'état de guerre, et doit appliquer le droit international humanitaire qui encadre cette situation. Malheureusement encore, la rébellion du Maroc contre la légitimité internationale est encouragée par la protection de quelques puissances internationales qui participent à la finance de la guerre à travers le pillage des richesses et des ressources naturelles des territoires non autonomes du Sahara occidental dans une manipulation très grave qui viole les normes de droit relatives au principe de souveraineté et viole aussi le droit et la sécurité juridique des échanges transfrontaliers. Le Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies est responsable de l'impasse qui caractérise aujourd'hui le conflit de Sahara occidental, car le Conseil de sécurité a accepté malheureusement que la MINURSO soit une exception dans le monde de l'émission des Nations Unies. Il n'a pas le droit de contrôler la situation des droits de l'homme dans le Sahara occidental. Et donc, l'histoire de ce conflit en général est décourageante pour toute personne qui croit aux règles des droits internationaux. Merci de m'avoir écouté. J'ai terminé.
Okay.
Mailid, so I think Bosco would translate in few words because Amima has some practical problem to join us.
Yeah, just she had a battery issue just when he started. She left it, so I don't listen everything, but I think Fernand de Varennes comprend le français, so it's okay for other people. Just for resume the situation, it's as you can see on the screen, Mailid shared. So they also ask for the right to self-determination under the Article 1514 from the 14 December 1916. And it's about the declaration on the granting of the independence to the colonial countries. And also he's talking about the resolution 2072 from 1965. So that's mean, I mean, you know, that the UN General Assembly already take the case of Western Sahara, but unfortunately, because of the, I think, you know, the support for the American government by the French government and also other Western countries, that resolution was not applied. So even la Cour de justice internationale avait conclu en 1974 comme quoi l'utilisation des ressources de Western Sahara par le Maroc était illégale et que les pays étaient censés de respecter cette loi. Et en même temps, tout récemment, il y a eu l'Union européenne aussi.
You're supposed to translate this into English.
Oh, sorry. Pardon. So just for remembering that, you know, the Western Sahara case, it's pending at the UN General Assembly until 1965.
Pardon, je vous écoute parce que j'ai partagé avec vous la traduction en anglais, les idées traduire en anglais.
Oui, mais en fait, on peut pas. Oui, voilà, en fait, comme j'essaie de résumer au gros maximum, en fait. Donc, so the issue is there is la Cour de justice internationale avait eu une décision déjà en 60. Sorry, had already a decision from 74. So and also recently la Cour européenne des droits de l'homme also make some decision that's the utilization of the resource by the the Moroccan country, it was illegal, and also advised to all the European country members to not do any agreement regarding the resource from Western Sahara with the Moroccan government. So that's why, I mean, for Moroccan people, they are, I mean, Western Sahara people are asking for their rights to self-determination. So it's very important to, I mean, it's already pending until 65. So also it's very important to note that the Moroccan government used the drones for killing Western Sahara people, and also Western Sahara people are living under how to say, as in the refugee camps. Even their land and also the resources from the Western Sahara lands are occupied by the Moroccan government. So that's why it's very important. I mean, that's why the Moroccan the Western Sahara people took arms and tried to fight for their freedom. And after that, there was many resolution, and also there was the MINURSO. It's a mission from United Nations for explore the situation in the Western Sahara and also to protect the civilians. But until now, there is no more change because of some issue regarding the Security Council. So that's why Western Sahara people ask for their right to self-determination. So yeah. Next speaker.
Yeah, thank you, Bosco, for your translation. So our next speaker is Dr.Baban Eliassi. He is joining us from Switzerland, where he lives in exile. He's a Kurdish activist and also a sociologist. He is the vice-president of Centre Zagros pour les droits de l'homme, which is a non-governmental organization based in Geneva. He also holds a degree on MA Sociology in University of Geneva. He's also author of many reviews, the last one being Les Kurdes d'Iran à l'écart. So now we have the immense pleasure to welcome Dr. Baban Eliassi from Switzerland. The floor is yours, Dr. Dr. Baban Eliassi is here among us.
Baban, tu dois unmuter. Attends. Baban, il faut unmuter. Voilà, c'est bon.
C'est bon?
C'est bon.
Okay, merci. Hello, everybody. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about the situation of Kurds in Iran. I would like also to thank Dr. Fernand de Varennes, as well as the organizer of this event. Indeed, Iran is composed of different ethnic groups. According to the Iranian authorities, the non-Persian ethnic minorities make up around 60% of the Iranian population. The main minority groups are Kurds, Turkish-speaking Azerbaijanis, Arabs, Baluchs, Lurs, and smaller population of Armenian and Turkmen. Since the Pahlavi monarchy's creation of the modern Iranian nation state in 1905, the rulers in Tehran have imposed a brutal chauvinistic system based on the supremacy of Persian ethnicity and of the Shiite faith. Non-Persian peoples are treated as second-class citizens, denied the rights to public education in their own language. Forced Farsi language education is one major tool used by the Iranian regime to forcibly assimilate its non-Persian minorities. According to the Amnesty International, the Kurdish population in Iran is estimated at about 12 million. The discrimination against Kurds who are ethnically and religiously distant from Persian Shiite is constitutionally established. According to the Article 115 of the Iranian Constitution, one of the qualifications of candidate for the presidential is he has convinced belief in the fundamental principles of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the official mazhab of the country. So most of the Kurds, because of their religion, who are not Shiite, who are Sunni, cannot be candidate for the presidency in Iran. This is the case in other high-ranking governmental posts. As far as I know, no Sunni Kurd has held a ministerial or high governmental post since 4 decades of the Republic Islamic of Iran. The oppression against the Kurds began just after the revolution. The Kurds actively participated in the revolution of 1979. After that, the Kurdish political movement proposed a solution to the central government to solve the Kurdish question within a democratic Iran where the Kurds can enjoy in a regional autonomy. The Kurds did their best to find a peaceful solution. The central government refused the Kurdish demands. As soon as the central government felt strong enough, Ayatollah Khomeini, the religious leader of Iran, declared holy war against the Kurdish people. Since more than 10,000 Kurds have lost their lives. This violence continues till today. According to the UN Special Rapporteur on Iran, Kurdish political prisoners charged with national security offenses constitute a disproportionately high number of those who received the death penalty and are executed. Only in 2020, over 500 Iranian Kurds, including human rights defenders, were arrested for politically motivated reasons and charged with broad and vaguely worded national security-related offenses. At least 159 of them were subsequently sentenced to prison terms ranging from 1 month to 17 years and 4 of them received the death penalty. Politically, the main Kurdish political parties in Iranian Kurdistan seeking an internal self-determination in form of federal system. Since the 4 decades of the reign of Republic of Islamic of Iran, all peaceful attempts proposed by the Kurdish representatives in Iran has met with violence and oppression. The Kurdish leaders were assassinated during the negotiation in Vienna in 1989 by the so-called Iranian diplomats. The demand of Kurds in Iran is that the federalism and regional autonomy would enable them to control their own affairs, protect their land rights, and exercise their cultural rights. In Iranian Kurdistan, there is flagrant human rights violations, persistent oppression, targeted killings, domination, discrimination, marginalization, and excluded from decision-making, Their culture is suppressed, their religion is discriminated, and there is languicide against Kurdish language in Iran. In many cases, the question of self-determination has been resolved through non-violent means. In example, in Quebec, Wales, and Scotland, separatist movements have not boiled over into violent conflict. In each, the central government granted some self-rule to the separatist region, preventing the situation from turning violent. The movement were able to argue their cases through elected political representatives. It teaches us a real functioning democratic system could reduce the likelihood of violence. In many cases, the non-violence is not enough to have its own right. In Iran, all peaceful options have been blocked by central government. The only option for the Kurds and other ethnic groups existing is to accept the subordination and assimilation policies of the Persian-based central government. But increased oppression and continued social and economic marginalization of the Kurds and other people in Iran will generate more extremist backlash and will bring Iran towards much more instability. Several international conventions reaffirm the right to self-determination, but they also pledge to uphold the principle of territorial integrity and the rights of existing states to prevent regions from seceding. Unfortunately, self-determination only exists on papers. The UN member states block any attempt to secede, even if there are serious violations of human rights. The question is that what option remains when nation states in countries like Iran block any peaceful solution for the Kurds and other ethnic groups, and on the other part, internationally, the UN member states block any attempt to secede. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Baban Eliassi. That was our last speaker who evoked the Kurdish plight on this fight for self-determination. Thank you very much for your to all the speakers who have beautifully come with their people's problem, and this was a very rich experience today to have all of you speaking about the struggle for self-determination, and it is very shocking, but at the same time not really, because we are coming across the same. We can point many similarities, be it Tamils, Kurds, southern Yemeni, southern Cameroons, Western Sahrawis. We can see a lot of similarities in our past, in our historical, in our history, and in our current situation, and how we face these problems within the framework of the United Nations. And the major thing here was every speaker evoked this problem of the UN's role, and with the major question, which is self-determination still possible within the framework of United Nations, and how far United Nations is attentive to our problems? So with these questions, we can welcome now our guest today, Dr. Fernand de Varennes, who is our Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues. So without further delay, I welcome Dr. Fernand de Varennes to give his speech on this issue of self-determination. The floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Misha. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome or hello, everyone, or good morning here in my part of Canada. Good afternoon to many of you in Europe, and good evening for some of you in other parts of the world. First of all, I want to express my gratitude and the honor also at the invitation from the Tamil Rights Activist Forum for participating, for the opportunity of participating in this forum on the right of self-determination of nations and minorities. I think one of the points I'd like to mention before I actually begin is how much I appreciate hearing some very powerful messages and the information and the understanding that you've shared with all of us today on the situations of minorities and other groups in different parts of the world. And what struck me is how much there is much that has to be done if really we are to protect the human rights of everyone and live in societies that are just and fair for all of those that live in these countries. The other issue that struck me is the extent. It should be clear, I think, to most of us that there are serious challenges in relation to how the United Nations deals with issues of conflict, of tensions, and we should say, and we should recognize injustice and even brutality against certain segments of the population in various parts of the world. And I think it's important to be honest and to recognize that through much of its history, the United Nations is mainly what we call an IGO. Essentially, it was created as an intergovernmental organization. And therefore, many of its structures, much of its functioning and its approach deals with actually reflecting the interests and the concerns of governments, of countries, of states. Now, having said that, and connecting to the issue that you have raised, which is an extremely important one, the issue of self-determination, the United Nations has developed into an organization which is very clearly concerned with human rights issues, with the protection of human rights. Does it really, does it succeed all the time? Well, we all know that it doesn't. We all know that there are serious, extremely serious situations of violations of human rights around the world, including particularly in relation to some of the most vulnerable communities, such as minorities and women in many parts of the world. However, one point which I think is the issue which you've raised very often is that the situation has evolved. If you look at the role of the United Nations in issues of self-determination, the issue of self-determination only really began to crystallize at the United Nations in the 1950s and 60s. In other words, it's a situation which emerged after its creation and started to develop and strengthen over the decades in relation to what is self-determination and who is able to claim self-determination. Now, I don't want to give a lecture today, but I think many of you understand that at the beginning, the concept of self-determination at the United Nations was very restricted. They were really talking about nations, but nations or peoples, which meant states initially. Then it evolved to include non-self-governing territories, former colonies, like we have heard today in relation to Western Sahara. And then further on, and here is, I think, the positive note that we should think about, further on, it started to talk about the self-determination of indigenous peoples. This is a much more recent phenomenon, but it is one which is acknowledged at the United Nations today as self-determination in a more limited sense of internal self-determination within the state, but that indigenous peoples have a right of self-determination, which means they have the right to some form of self-rule, of autonomy, of control over their own affairs that they can exercise. And I want to emphasize that for two reasons. One, that it shows that there is an evolution which continues today, hasn't stopped, which it is my hope, and I'll refer to this later on, that can be extended to other groups, that the right of self-determination should be the right also of minorities. It's not quite there yet, but if we look at what has been occurring with the right of indigenous peoples, this is a direction which I think clearly we can talk about. And in fact, not only should we talk about, but we should be working towards as an objective in order to improve, very honestly, the functioning of the United Nations in relation to, well, what is self-determination, who is entitled to that, but also to better protect minorities around the world. Now, once again, I think we need to be frank, perhaps even blunt. There are situations such as the case of the Western Sahara, as we've heard earlier, which clearly should be, I will use a colloquial expression, a no-brainer. Clearly, here is a situation of a group that in international law has the right to self-determination. It's still not being implemented properly, but still we need to actually sustain attention, raise awareness, and actually work towards what should be clearly a fundamental right of the Sahrawi people in Western Sahara. Secondly, in the case of self-determination for other groups, indigenous peoples, and I would say minorities, I want to emphasize to you that things are beginning to change a little bit. And I would like to invite you to also consider this and work together, work with my mandate and other institutions to actually perhaps push things in this direction. Last year, there was a new report prepared by an institute connected with the government of Liechtenstein. And it is a report on self-determination. So it just came out last year. But the report actually, I think, very clearly indicates that the right of self-determination should be expanded, should be opened up so that it clearly includes, well, indigenous peoples, but also minorities and other groups which currently within the United Nations of the system really doesn't acknowledge that they have a right of autonomy, for example, of self-rule, of controlling their own affairs. I mentioned that report, obviously it is a report of a center connected with the government of Liechtenstein, but there are other governments around the world and other institutions that are interested in this concept of self-determination as a form or an approach that would help to better protect the rights of minorities and other vulnerable groups and communities. Secondly, also help prevent violent conflicts. I don't think anyone here is naive enough to believe that conflicts simply happen. There are contexts, usually of exclusion, of discrimination, of violence against certain communities, and especially minorities, which lead to violent conflicts. And that by giving a degree of self-determination, in the sense of real autonomy, real power to protect the populations, such as indigenous peoples, minorities, and others, that this is one of the most effective tools to prevent conflicts around the world. The preceding speaker, I think from the Kurdish minority in Iran, did mention there are plenty of examples around the world where giving autonomy to the French-speaking people in Quebec, to the German-speaking people in Italy, and many other examples were ways to prevent, to stop conflicts from becoming extremely violent by ensuring that the populations involved, the minorities or other groups, feel that they have control over their own lives, have a real place and voice and power within the context of the state. Here's my invitation and the point I would like to raise, that where perhaps you can do more to help us change the United Nations and perhaps change also the practices in many countries. This year is the 30th anniversary. It's been 3 decades since the adoption of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Minorities. The declaration is a political statement. It's not a legal document, but it actually does provide some degree of protection for minorities. However, we're using this 30th anniversary this year to organize within the context of 4 regional forums in 4 parts of the world, regional meetings, regional forums, to look at What can we do to actually improve the protection of minorities? That's my mandate. Minorities around the world. What could be better measures, better activities of the United Nations to try to make this real, to try to make this more effective and concrete? And one of the suggestions I would hope, or invitations I would make to you, is please participate in these regional forums, these regional discussions, where you will, if you email to my mandate, we can provide you a greater detail. But I think it's important to use this, perhaps as a way to help improve the United Nations in what it is doing to protect minorities, improve the international mechanisms to actually perhaps open the discussion on the right of self-determination, expanding it and making it stronger. There will be, after these regional forums, the United Nations Forum on minorities in Geneva in December of this year, which should focus on the same thing. Yes, let's celebrate the anniversary of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Minorities, but secondly, let's do better. Let's move forward, and we need to hear the voices of minorities to make sure that their human rights, including the right of self-determination, is eventually recognized, incorporated, and attempts made to improve what actually doesn't always work very effectively. Let me just give you a couple of examples, and I think we should open the floor for further discussions. I'll be let me be honest, in the sense that I also, even as a UN Special Rapporteur on minority issues, face obstacles from the United Nations. I've been told not to get involved with Yemen, by the way, because, well, I had received allegations involving the Shia minority in part of the country. And the message I was told was that this population was not a minority. I won't go into the detail of the arguments, but essentially, if there are no minorities, I cannot get involved. This happened with Yemen. This happened with Ethiopia, also with another group. And it happens actually rather surprisingly often when United Nations officials do not want us, or in this, I should say, me, to get involved because they're not comfortable with the idea that there are minorities that have rights that they can claim in complex situations. We need to work together to do more, to do better, and to improve what sometimes institutionally, even at the United Nations, is not always easy when we refer to the rights of minorities. So on that note, I will stop here, once again, express my gratitude to be able not only to share with you a few of my own observations in relation to self-determination, but also to be able to actually hear from you and better understand what is the context in many of your countries, which needs to be addressed. Obviously, I agree with that. Merci beaucoup. Et je retourne la parole à Madame Nisha pour la continuation de ce forum. Merci.
Merci, Mr. de Varennes. We are very much grateful to you for your beautiful intervention and your support for us within this limited power that you have, as you have explained to us. As you reminded us, there is this 30th anniversary of the United Nations rights of minorities, and I remind everyone here that there are forums that are organized by the UN. Mr. Varennes is inviting all of us to participate to these regional forums, and as he said, you are invited to participate, and you can also register in the UN's website, where you can find all the information. If you can't find any, please refer to Bosco, who is just raising his hand, and I will give the floor to Bosco. I also want to remind people that if you want to ask any question to our special rapporteur, Mr. de Varennes, if he's okay to Yeah, of course. So we will have some, we will take some questions from people who are maybe other than people who are who have already gave their speeches. So if people want to do the intervention, I mean questions to Mr. de Varennes, they can raise their hand and let us know that they have questions. And please remain very short because we are running out of time now. So let's for the first question, I'm asking Bosco.
Yeah, merci Fernand de Varennes pour ton intervention. So really, it was really very, very informative, and also we have a lot of information. So just I want to ask, you know, for I think it will be this year. Sorry, we have until next March session. You'll be there in the mandate, I think.
Extension for closing.
So my question is, I mean, I want to have some remark. If any chance, I want to ask you if any chance for you to have a hearing with the president or the committee of the fourth committee in General Assembly. You know, the decolonization committee. The special committee on decolonization, if any chance for you to have, I mean, we also talked with Livingston regarding that, the independent expert on international order. He also want to focus his mandate to this year regarding the right to self-determination. So any chance for you to also to orient your reports on that way? And also, I mean, we can have a small hearing with the fourth committee and I mean all the people and nation and minorities who are present. They can come and talk, and if it any chance for you to. I mean, we can also ask, but it's better if you can, with the Livingston, jointly ask to have that hearing with the General Assembly. And I mean, it's one of the options, because the problem is the problem is the situation of the nation who are and minorities who are seeking for their rights. They are facing a lot of struggle, and it's not easy. Even at the Human Rights Council, they prioritize some issue, and all others are not on the table. So that's why, as a special rapporteur, if you can help us to have a platform for have a discussion, it will be really good. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'll answer you, Bosco, immediately. We should probably explore further. So if you write to me in relation to particularly the Committee on Decolonization, we can look at, and other matters you've raised, we can look at it more closely. In relation to the Committee on Decolonization, without completely answering, I think there might be a bit of a difficulty there, because my mandate is limited to minorities. And in the context, let's say, of the Committee on Decolonization, they deal with, strictly speaking, from a legal point of view, it is peoples and not minorities. It is peoples, particularly in the former colonial context. So I think there are some very clear obstacles here, but without answering or dismissing completely the points you raised, I think we should probably start a discussion as to whether the Committee on Decolonization or other instances within the UN, like perhaps more easily open certain doors with you. So perhaps let's discuss this further a little bit later on. Merci, Bosco.
Thank you. And next question will be from Baban Eliassi, who was also a speaker for this event. So Baban, welcome back. His mic seems to be
Monsieur Eliassi, votre microphone est fermé.
Can you please unmute?
C'est bon, merci. My question is for Dr. Fernand. The one is that, as I explained in my presentation about the situation of Kurds in Iran, there is a politic of assimilation and subordination in Iranian Kurdistan. And sometimes there are armed resistance to this politic. My question is that, is it legitimate for example, for the Kurds in Iran that they have no other choices to take arm and to resist to this politic of assimilation? Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. You know, I'm going to have to answer this in a rather diplomatic way. It is not possible for me as the United Nations Special Rapporteur to say that violence is ever an appropriate response. Having said that, of course, there are situations where us at the United Nations and other members of the international community must do everything we can to avoid that violence erupts. And I would say that we are not doing enough in many parts of the world where many may feel that they have no other option. So that's why one of the reasons I would invite you to work with my mandate, other special rapporteurs and other mechanisms within the United Nations to try to avoid those kinds of situations at all costs. But let me emphasize once again, in my opinion, the United Nations is absolutely not doing enough to address the grievances, and I would add the legitimate grievances, which usually last for many, many years before you have the first incidents of violence in any country. Merci beaucoup. J'espère que j'ai répondu à votre question.
Thank you, Mr. de Varennes. Yes, we do still believe in the non-violence process, and we do still believe in the UN system with all the limits you have yet exposed to us. And our next question will come from Rev.Father Jumbam, who was also a speaker of this event.
My question is going to Dr. Fernand, who is our host here. And I'm so grateful actually being in company with such a high personality in the UN. First of all, I'd like to appreciate his frankness. Just a few seconds ago, he made a certain statement, being very frank about the situation of the organization that he is part of it. And I just like to, because I am part of this, not actually, I don't think the Southern Cameroons, which I am native of, is even maybe like a minority. It should be a nations, because the topic of our discussion is about self-determination among nations and the minorities. And I just like to feel that the situation of the Southern Cameroons is a bit delicate, and if we sometimes feel the way we feel and the way we present our things, we just pray that the UN understands our situation, and understands that we feel, because our people have gone deep into the history of that situation, and we feel very deeply that there is a very big slice of the problem of the Southern Cameroons that the UN is responsible. We know that sometimes we talk about UN, it looks like maybe it's a body, as he explains that maybe it began like maybe an NGO, and then we understand that very, very well. But we just expect that with people who are suffering and who are conscious of the fact that it is some of those, some of the little misunderstandings between the countries that were involved in the issue about the Southern Cameroons in the 60s that created the problem that we are facing, that when we are going through what we are going through, it's just a plea to the United Nations, which I just pray that he could bring to them, that a statement just a statement. And we don't expect so much from the UNO. I'm being very frank. We don't expect so much from, because when it's a matter of independence, it's the people who decide, and they make their declarations and they stand by it. Yeah, but we just expect the United Nations to be understanding and to listen to our people. And just a statement, actually, or maybe say something about the Southern Cameroons, because actually, like this meeting that we're meeting, they just want to hear something about how you feel about them. It's a neglected issue, which I feel that we still need a comment from Dr. Fernand de Varennes about their situation, which actually it's a serious situation. And I think among the situations that are here, it should be the very first, or maybe if the second actually, which it's a situation and which the United Nations historically, we are talking history, is concerned. They caused it. A very big slice of the problem actually is the United Nations, the way things were handled in the 60s, and then gradually the silence of the United Nations.
For your question, given that the lack of time, we will directly go to the answer from Fernand de Varennes.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, Gerald. Thank you very much, Gerald. I have to actually perhaps really emphasize one point. For example, for me to intervene in any situation, it has to deal with minorities. If we're not dealing with a minority in southern Cameroon, I have no authority to speak out or do anything. Let me actually point out two things. When we refer to minorities at United Nations, it does not exclude that we also might be dealing at the same time with the people. It does not, and particularly we're referring to a group that could be either ethnic, linguistic, or religious. And I think linguistically, when we are dealing with the population of South Cameroon, we are talking mainly about the English-speaking, who are a minority within Cameroon. Now, let me say two things. First of all, the United Nations has made a few statements in relation to the situation in in Cameroon, more in 2020, I think. Although they were, so there were some statements being made, perhaps not enough, in fact, clearly not enough, and I agree with you, Gerald, in relation to that. I want to make one final point. The government of Cameroon has actually officially stated in the General Assembly that I should not be talking about your situation in Cameroon because it's not a minority. So the government of Cameroon is trying to insist that because you are not a minority, I have no rights. I should be quiet about the situation in southern Cameroon. So I have here a choice to make. If I accept that we are not dealing with a minority in Cameroon, then my voice is silenced. And may I say that I have raised the issue of southern Cameroon in a few of my reports to the UN General Assembly. And in my view, we are dealing with a linguistic minority, and I should be even perhaps more vocal to raise the concerns of denial of the rights of the population in the southern Anglophone regions. Thank you, Gerald.
Thank you, Mr. de Varennes. So there is a big existentialist question: to be or not to be. I think, like, what is self? What is determination? What is being minority? So there is a lot of to do around that, I think. So thank you very much for being so frank about your answers. And I see for now 4 more questions, 4 more hands raised. So we will start with these questions. I take Eda Gilbert from Italy, and then Foba Omaima, and also our speaker Hassan, and then we will start with these questions because we are running out of time. So from Italy, I'm welcoming Eda Gilberti for her question.
Hello. I'll be short and sorry my bad English. Good evening, everyone. My name is Edda, and president and founder Tripla Difesa Onlus, no profit, Italian country, and 20-11 year constituency. Our organization is receiving a lot of retaliation from Italian agenti, carabinieri, polizia, local police, many institutions, not from big ministries, but in Italy, a lot of incompetence. What should we turn to be supported and protection if there an office in Italy that speak Italian and know what human rights are? Thank you.
Thank you very much, but I don't think I understand which minority we're dealing with. And so it's not clear in my mind which groups are involved.
No, I mean, she's a victim of Italian, Italian mafia locally. So she's a human rights activist. So she wanted to say a few words regarding that. But I think I messaged her that it's not the right forum. So yeah.
Yeah, this is not in my area. My apologies.
So the next question will be from Hassan.
Merci, Dr. Fernand. Vraiment, je pose la question en français, mais vous pouvez quand même répondre en anglais. Ma question est telle que si aujourd'hui dans le Sahara occidental, et comme vous avez remarqué, c'est un clair cas de décolonisation et de l'autodétermination, des droits de l'autodétermination des peuples du Sahara occidental. Mais aujourd'hui, nous avons une autre situation. Nous avons une situation de guerre. Nous avons une situation de drones qui tuent les civils, sans parler de la crise des droits de l'homme dans les zones occupées du Sahara occidental. Là, aujourd'hui, ma question, est-ce que vous ne voyez pas que la l'application des droits internationaux humanitaires, ça veut dire oublier les conventions de Genève et les protocoles associés, est-ce que vous ne voyez pas ça comme une violation des droits internationaux en général, je crois, de la partie de la communauté internationale? Cette fois-ci, on parle pourquoi le droit international humanitaire qui encadre la situation de guerre et la situation d'occupation militaire, pourquoi il n'est pas appliqué dans cette situation? Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup à vous. I will answer in English. I agree, Hassan, completely that we have here a problem of the implementation of international human and humanitarian law. There's no other way to deny it. Unfortunately, there are very, very weak mechanisms at the level of the United Nations to ensure that international human rights law is respected. And in the case of Western Sahara, it should be one of the most obvious cases that international law is not being fully respected. I think, to answer shortly, that what is needed is to actually strengthen and reform the United Nations. Strengthen in the sense that when it comes to the human rights mechanism, especially, the United Nations is very weak on enforcement. And Western Sahara, to me, is one of the most obvious cases of the very weak implementation mechanisms that we have. Because essentially, it's the UN Security Council, in the end, that really has any power. But the UN Security Council is a political entity. It's not a human rights entity. That's very clear. So these are the weaknesses, the gaps that we have to deal with. But then again, I would suggest that it's simply a mean that we have to try to redouble efforts to make the situation actually improve and change. And particularly that means that all human rights groups should collaborate with the various groups organizations representing Western Saharis to actually ensure that their rights are respected. There's no easy answer because we are dealing with weak mechanisms for human rights and international humanitarian law. But remember that 30 years ago, it was even weaker. 40 years ago, it was even weaker. So that's why I think we have to persevere and try to help as much as possible. Those are in extremely weak positions, including in Western Sahara, which is now, as you said, in a kind of warlike situation. There's no easy answer, but that means we actually have to continue to try to make that situation change. Merci, Hassan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Considering the time, we will quickly move on to the next question by Foba. Please unmute his mic.
Thank you, Chair, and my gratitude to Dr. Fernand, and especially also to Father Gerard. I am a citizen of Southern Cameroon, where Father Gerard hails from, and I would, just like Father Gerard did, I would appreciate Dr. Fernand's frankness. In fact, in view of the institution, the environment in which you are operating, I will consider that you are in fact in some very precarious water. And my question is to you, is directed to you, Dr. Fernand. But before I direct the question, I would want to situate you so you can better you could have a better grasp of my question. I would want to situate you in the historical context of British Southern Cameroon. Yes, you did mention that the Cameroon diplomats at the UN who are well coached by their French masters, who have never granted them independence, always bully you to say that you should be quiet because Southern Cameroon is not a minority. Yes, truly it is not a minority in a sense that it's a case of a botched United Nations decolonization process. Now, what happened in 1961 was, instead of the United Nations preparing the Southern Cameroons for self-governance and granting them their independence as was mandated. I'm very sorry, Nisha. I'm very sorry, Nisha. I will for Dr. Fernand to answer my question, please. I will beg for just 3 more minutes to just a brief historical context, and then I'll pose my question, please. So there was a botched UN decolonization process. On the 31st of September, when the British took down the Union Jack, instead of handing it over to Southern Cameroons, they handed it to French Cameroon, which had just received its so-called independence from France. Of course, they have never been independent. So there has been this deal between the French and the English, and they are therefore embarrassed when you bring up this problem to them. That is why they tell you to hush down. And so my question is, can you therefore direct us to the appropriate quarters within the United Nations that deal with decolonization, with botched or failed decolonization processes? If you would, even if you would, it means that you work behind the scenes with us, please direct us to those quarters that deals with failed or botched decolonization process. For the Gerard and us, will be very grateful if you can direct us to such quarters. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that information. I think the short answer is that unless I'm dealing with a minority population, I have no authority to do anything. I have a mandate, specific mandate. So if it's not a minority population, the answer is no, I cannot get involved in any way. Having said that, there are historically many cases of botched self-determination processes where the United Nations has been involved historically. There is a situation of Eritrea, which I would consider to have been also initially a botched self-determination process. West Papua in Indonesia. Historically, we would be naive to deny that this has been the case, sometimes when the UN has been involved. But as I said, if a group cannot be considered to be a minority, no, I cannot take any step, even if there was a botched self-determination process, unless the group involved is a minority. But thank you for that.
Thank you. And we have still 2 more questions. The next one is by Omaima, I think. Omaima, is it you? The mic is, I think, is on. Can you?
Yes, it's on. Hello. Hello, Fernand. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to listen to our situation. I apologize because in just a moment I wanted to translate. My telephone has run out from battery, so really I'm sorry. Sorry, Bosco. Thank you, Bosco, for inviting us for this conference. Thank you, Fernand, for giving us your time and your intelligence to listen to us. My name is Omaima. I am a woman from Western Sahara. I just want to say something on behalf of all my colleagues who are here, that all the problems that you are hearing today in this room are problems that are created by European and Western countries. The same one who are blocking the implementation of right of self-determination in these countries, and the same one who are blocking the implementation of international humanitarian law in the occupied ones. So in my case, in Western Sahara, we have become minority thanks to the settlers that has been pumped to change the demography of our territory, to change our culture. And everyone knows that, and no one do nothing to help the Sahrawi people to exist as a nation, to help the Tamils to exist as a nation. Who have said that it's only 193 countries who should exist? Who said that? It's Western countries, the one who has the right to veto, who are making us suffering their decisions, because we are the minorities who are subjected to the laws that we don't create. We are subjected to occupation that we don't invite no one. So why we should be silenced to this kind of subjections? Why should we accept these rules that we don't create? Who said that we don't have a right to exist as nations? I'm sorry to say that, and I really thank you. I am sure that you are intelligent enough to understand when the government said to you, this is not minorities, you are enough intelligent to know when the people are subjected to mistreatment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Varennes, you want maybe to react to this?
There was no question, but in many ways, I agree with you, Madam Maima. I would just say, unfortunately, that now the international system, the global system at the United Nations, is still very much state-oriented, which means that even within Africa or Asia, most governments of most countries are happy the way things are going. They don't want to change borders, or they want to have control over certain territories. But fundamentally, I also agree with most of the points that you made. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Varennes. And our last question will be from the speaker of this event also, Mr. Nasr Obaid.
Thank you, Mr. Ferran, for this valuable information. Yeah, this is the second time for us. I think last time we listened to you, we got some information, valuable information from you too, that maybe it will help us for our problem, self-determination in the south of Yemen. I agree with you that our problem is different from other problems, minority and so on. But I know maybe some countries, they don't want you to work with us. I understand this what's happened. But in 2017, also when we were in Geneva during the Human Rights Council, we were working as human rights defender, also for self-determination. At that time, we planned, we have to have our side events next day, as that it was it should be on Friday, last Friday, like something like this. but we were surprised that some countries reported us for the organization that give us the badge to enter the Human Rights Council. And at that time, Mr. Bosco maybe already remember that what's happened to us. They refuse us and they block us to enter the Human Rights Council. It's not related that working with the minority or something like this, but some countries, they don't want us to speak at all about the self-determination. That was in 2017, maybe in 18, but now maybe they cannot say more, something like this.
Thank you for that clarification, that information.
Okay, so now thank you very much for your presence to all of you, and especially to Mr. Fernand de Varennes for your precious time and your support for us, for all these voiceless people who are made minorities, as was pointed. So thank you very much for your presence, and we noted that we are all welcome for the regional forums that are organized for the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the United Nations Rights of Minorities, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary. So if anyone wants to have any information, you can text me or Bosco. I think probably most of you have Bosco's number, so you can contact us for further details. So please be connected. It is with unity that we can change this world within the limits that Mr. de Varennes has exposed to us. Thank you, Mr. de Varennes, for your presence with us and among the victims. And I'm also thanking again all the speakers who have done a very wonderful job. And I'm inviting all of you to send us also your statement by written format. If you haven't done it yet, we can send to Bosco's email so that we make a sort of a libre to transfer it to the inside the system of your UNHRC, so we can register it as a side event as we do in during the sessions. So thank you very much. So, and we look forward to see you in other forums also. With that, if everyone is awesome.
I wanted to thank everyone once again for the privilege and the pleasure of actually meeting you and speaking to many of you. And I hope we'll be able to do something like this again soon. Au revoir tout le monde. Merci.
Merci Fernand. J'espère qu'on se reverra bientôt. On aimerait bien préparer un autre side event justement lors de la prochaine session. Donc, on se tient au courant par email.
Parfait, Bosco. Merci. À la prochaine. Au revoir.
À la prochaine. Au revoir.
Recording stopped.
Merci tout le monde. Merci Hassan, Father Jumbam, tout le monde. Merci. On se reparle par WhatsApp, d'accord? Au revoir.
Merci, au revoir. Il y a longtemps qu'on ne s'est pas vu, quoi.
on va se voir, t'inquiète pas.
À la prochaine.
Allez, à bientôt.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
On se parlera au WhatsApp.
OK, bye.